All right, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us. My name is Ndapiro Shali and I work for the Henry Nxumalo Foundation. We're going to start right away, actually. The only thing we're requesting you to do right now is to please contribute to the poll. So we're finding out which part of SADC you're from, or if not, you can also write that. There is a second question for that. So please do take a look at the poll that's running. It's going to run throughout, and then we're going to have some interactive sessions. And then we're also going to have some more, one final poll just towards the end. So please do stick around for that as well. With that said, also, if you could kindly change your name to your name and surname of the name of your device, just so that we can take record of what you are, of who was here today. And I'm going to hand over to Anton, and he'll take it from here.
Good afternoon. And thank you very much for joining us today. I am Anton Harber. I'm the Executive Director of the Henry Nxumalo Foundation, which is the host organization for the project we're here to talk about today, the Southern African Accountability Journalism Project. You just met Ndapa Woshali, who is our operations manager. If you'll be working with us and joining this project, then she'll be the person who deals with all administrative matters and will be important to our project. Also with us is our editorial coordinator, Daneel Knoetze. Daneel, won't you just show your face briefly? Daneel is from Viewfinder. He is going to be coordinating our editorial work. Also with us are two other partners, Joel Kanopo from Botswana. Joel, if you could just give us a hello.
Hello, everyone. I hope I'm not muted.
No, can you turn your camera on for a minute?
Okay, I will do as we proceed. I can't find the.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and Fiona from Oxpeckers. Fiona, if you could just say hello.
Hello, everybody. It's Fiona McLeod here. I'm not changing my name on my icon. It's Oxpeckers Investigative Environmental Journalism, and I will choose not to switch my camera on for various reasons. Thank you for the introduction.
Not at all. That's most of our core team that's running Henry Nxumalo Foundation and running this project in particular. This webinar is the first event in this project, the Southern Africa Accountability Journalism Project, SAAJP. In short, it is a 3-year project, a 3-year drive to enable, encourage, and promote investigative journalism across the SADC countries. It is, I hope you'll agree with me, a wonderful opportunity for us to do great investigative reporting, to work together to promote investigative reporting across this subcontinent, to learn and develop our skills, and to build a network for ongoing collaboration across Southern Africa, because we know how important collaboration and cross-border work has become for investigative journalism of the sort we want to promote. So in short, that is our aim, to produce great journalism and to build a regional network of collaboration. And we hope you're going to join us on this 3-year journey. Let me just summarize briefly how we're going to work. We have issued, you will have seen, a call for proposals for investigative stories. And today, we're going to be talking to you about how to pitch that story and how to make that pitch successful, how to make it the best it can be to maximize its chances of being accepted into the project. A committee of us will then select the best of those pitches, and we will work closely with those journalists. We will give them grants to do the investigation, and we will pay them for their stories when they are ready to be published. And along the way, we will work with the reporters, with the journalists, to get the story as strong as we can, and make sure that when we publish it, it will have the maximum effect. We will offer mentoring, training, and editing through the whole process, working closely with you, the participants in the project, to get the best possible stories out there. Please make sure you take a close look at our website, which has all the details and a whole lot of information that will help you understand what we're doing, how we're doing it, and how to join the project. We'll put the URL up in the chat. I'm hoping this is going to be a really interactive session. Please, at any time when you have questions or comments, put them up in the chat and we'll respond to them at the appropriate moment. So thank you very much. The format this is going to take is that Daneel is going to talk to you about how to do a pitch, how to make sure it's successful. We've been seeing a number of pitches already. So he's going to draw on our experience on some of the problems we have with pitches and some advice on how to get it as strong as possible. I think we all know that pitching a story is an essential, critical skill. Whether you're in a newsroom or you're a freelancer or however you operate, you've got to be able to sell your story to an editor or a news editor as best you can. And so while this is built around pitching for this particular project, I'm hoping you will learn, we will help you in the skills of always pitching to whoever your editor is for your work. And let me just emphasize that our interest is in strong, hard-hitting accountability reporting that holds power to account, that follows the highest professional and ethical standards, and above all else serves the public interest. We're interested in public interest journalism that holds the powerful to account. That is what we are about, and that is the kind of journalism we're hoping to work with you and encourage and enable in this project over the next few years. Having said that, I'm going to ask Daneel to step in and to talk to you about how to make a pitch.
Thank you so much, Anton, for that introduction and to the project and the work that we hope to all be collaborating on, all in this room. I'm sure the majority of people here are interested not just in the theory, but in applying it and working with this opportunity and this project going forward. And I'm really enamored and excited by that prospect and to be an integral part, I hope, of the editorial process of supporting journalists. But yes, quite rightly, we are at the kind of beginning phases. And
sorry, Daneel, can you turn your camera on?
My apologies. My camera is on, and I might just share my screen.
Excellent. Sorry to disturb.
Just a moment. I'm just giving it the necessary permissions. Can everybody see the screen?
Yes.
The cover of the presentation? Anton, just confirm.
Yes, we can. Correct.
Okay, that's great. Cool. So thank you. Yes, I just need to there's a window of the poll that's popping up. Okay, great. Thank you, everyone. Sorry for just the technical glitch, but here we are. So yes, I mean, really critical at this stage in terms of forging the relationships with you all and with the journalists that are interested in collaborating with us on this opportunity is pitching. Ndapo Shali, can I ask you a favor? Please, can you close the poll for the time being? Because I think every time there's a response, I'm getting a flash of that window coming up. Yeah, and many of you might have seen, many of you might have pitched already using the questionnaire that we have put up as a Google form. And certainly Anton, myself, Joel, Fiona, we've been reviewing many of the pitches that have come in. We take encouragement from the enthusiasm, but we've also identified some ways I think that pitching journalists can really improve their opportunities and chances of being successful in terms of the pitches they've put forward. And that's really what this training and this presentation is about today. But before we get there, I usually like to start this kind of presentation by just reminding us all that investigative reporting is not entirely news and feature reporting of the type that many of us are accustomed to through the early phases of our career as we transition into more accountability orientated storytelling. It's got its own definitions, its methods, its formats of its outputs and its intentions. And these three things is really important for me in any discussion around how to effectively produce, pitch, execute, publish, and impact edit investigative journalism. It's just important to remember that what we're working on is operating within guidelines, within value systems, and within intentions and formats of outputs. So the first thing that I just want to point to is this definition, which is kind of cribbed from the Global Investigative Journalism Network. It speaks to method. It's systemic, it's in-depth, it's original research and reporting, and often the output of that is source material that is revealing, original, insightful, and it supports the output. It supports often an article or a product which exposes wrongdoing that causes harm in the world or contributes at least to a problem that's causing harm in the world. And we are not putting journalism out just for its intention, just for its own sake. The intention that we are pursuing is impact, reform, accountability, a rectification of the wrongdoing, the failures of accountability, the abuses of power that our reporting has uncovered. And so I think those three kind of points about method and source material, of course, the more explosive, the more original source material, the better. This is where I'm talking about values that we apply to investigative journalism. The wrongdoing and the harm, the more egregious the wrongdoing, the more impactful or negative the harm to the public interest, the more interesting investigative editors and audiences and consequential will find the work, and more consequential it has the potential of being. And to the intention there, then the more consequential its impact on accountability, on reform, on rectifying something in the public interest it can have potentially. So that's just an introductory slide, but let's just quickly look at the structure that this presentation will follow and how exactly I hope that this presentation will help you as an investigative reporter pitch the best story idea. First thing I'm going to look at is three things that I believe every investigative pitch needs to show. And I think a lot of editors around the world screening investigative pitches would agree to some orientation or variation of these three things. So that is the first section that I'm going to talk about, three things. They're actually just one, but they're three parts of the one thing. Then I'm going to move to three common pitfalls that we have seen, three common mistakes and pitfalls that we've seen journalists make in pitching. Anton and I have screened over the last few months, pilot project and this pitch, inclusive, about 100 investigative pitches. And we have seen recurring mistakes and pitfalls that journalists fall into. So I'm going to highlight those three, and I'm going to give you some pointers on how you as a pitching journalist can avoid those. And then finally, we've just got a slide where we're going to look at the pitching questionnaire, and we're going to interrogate or at least explore how we can integrate what we've learned from what the pitch needs to show and the pitfalls to avoid in actually populating that pitching questionnaire. So I'll just take a moment before we move on. The first section we're moving on to is the three things that I believe every investigative pitch should seek to show. The first thing is there is a problem in the world that is causing harm, right? I'll expand on that in a moment. I'll just leave that for the time being. The second thing is that something or someone, an institution, a powerful person, usually a powerful institution, contributes, not necessarily causes the entirety of the problem, but contributes to the problem by doing something specific wrong, abusing its power, negligence, failure of accountability. Call that what you may. I'm referring to it as wrongdoing for the purposes here, but of course there are different means of doing wrong. And I'm using the word contributes in bold there because what we often see, and I'll move to this in the pitfalls in a minute, is that journalists try and explain all of the possible causes of a problem by an entity, for instance. So they would try and say, police corruption is so vast and it has all of these different vectors, and I'm going to look at all of them, And what I want to encourage you to think is like the problem might be very expansive and big. The topic that you're working in might be very expansive and big, but your best bet as an investigative journalist, especially working within a defined time period, we're thinking 6 to 8 weeks for a story cycle, is to focus your inquiry to a contributing to wrongdoing that is specific by a specific entity that contributes to that problem. And the third thing that we're going to look out for, but the thing that really your pitch will be based upon, is whether you can demonstrate in your pitch that you have access to some source material to illustrate the harm, the problem that is in the world, but also how specific wrongdoing by someone in power, some powerful institution, contributes to that problem and harm. And I put in brackets there, additional to what you already have in hand, the groundwork that you've already done, you have shown to us that you've got a plan, that you've done some forward thinking, that if given an opportunity, you will be able to pursue and gather more information, evidence, access to solidify a more ambitious story, right? Than just the one that you can base on what access to source material, evidence, people, interviews you already have in hand. So here I've just color-coded those three concepts because I'm going to be returning to them right through the course of the presentation. We are looking for a problem that is causing harm in the world. We are looking to show that something or somebody contributes to this problem or harm by doing something wrong. And we are not just saying this as a pie-in-the-sky thing that we might want to investigate or prove. We've already gathered some, or limited evidence that is very alluring towards proving or illustrating that in some way. So otherwise put, I would say the format, in my opinion, for a winning pitch often can be boiled down to this kind of sentence. Wrongdoing by somebody or something causes, but I've been using the word contributes, to harm in the world. And I'm saying this not just as a thumbsuck, but I can back it up by some evidence. We're going to return. This is a very important slide, but I'm going to be returning to it time and again. So let's move on. So I just want to, it was really important for me to try and put some examples. And I guess the example that's closest to me is how I've incorporated that structure, that format in pitching a story successfully. And that story is soon to be published now, actually, because this pitch was successful. And I was actually given a lot of latitude to work on it with an international publication. And the pitch that I submitted looked something like this. Police brutality is rife in South Africa. Okay, there's a big problem, right? It's expansive. It's got many, many factors to it. In recent years, South African police officers have continued to employ torture methods it inherited from the apartheid-era police service, specifically tubing, which is a suffocation form of torture, against who? People in custody. Such systemized torture is little known to the public in South Africa or internationally. This will be an exclusive expose. Why? Right? So here we are giving a problem that is broad police brutality. We are showing that the police, which is obviously the entity in power that we're looking at, is doing something really specific that contributes to that problem. And it's not known. So we're pitching it as exclusive. Why? Well, here I'm basing it on the evidence that I have access to. I have access to never before seen complaints data from which I have extracted more than 2,000 such cases, which shows a sample of this sort of abuse recurring with regularity. But I'm asking you to employ me for some months to take the story to where it can go. I believe that given an opportunity, we can find victims to speak to about their experiences. I also think that we might be able to find police officers who will explain why this is ongoing. Why do I say that? Because I've got some contacts in the police service already, and I think that they can facilitate. And this is essentially, I mean, a pitch like this might be expound on some of these. This is a summary, what I'm giving you, but this is the essential kind of core, and every pitch can be boiled down to an essential kind of summary. So let's just return to the format for a winning pitch. There's wrongdoing. I'm sorry, this has been flipped upside down. Let me just return here. Wrongdoing, yes, it's right. Causes or by an entity or someone, causes or contributes to harm in the world, and I'm backing it up by some evidence. So having seen the example pitch that I did successfully some time back, I want us to just pause for 1 minute, and I want each of you to just jot down on your notepad 1 or 2 pitfalls or mistakes that you think journalists might make, even when given this kind of format. I'm going to put a timer on for 60 seconds, and then I want you to just think about that for a minute, and then we can compare what you've identified as likely pitfalls, how it integrates with what we have seen time and again with journalists. So 1 minute, and then I'll be back. Okay, folks. In radio, silence is deadly, and I guess I got that sense of just keeping quiet for so long. But I hope that the 30 seconds or the 45 seconds we had gave you the opportunity to anticipate at least one pitfall or mistake that journalists often make when asked to pitch in this way. Okay, so the first one I want to speak about is journalists often bury the lead. You give them this, you set up the pitching questionnaire to ask for this, and often that's not what you get in response. So a definition of a lead in news reporting is the opening paragraph of a news article which summarizes the most important aspects of the story that you're writing, right? So it kind of adapted to this pitching format that I'm talking about. The lead would really be this, take this format, right? The editor will be looking out for these three things and whether you can elevate that right to the top. And that's why the first question is, what is your hypothesis of wrongdoing? Who is doing what wrong? And what harm is it causing in the world? That's the first question that the questionnaire asks of you. And then secondary, what evidence do you have to back it up? So if we look at the police torture pitch, I won't dally on this, but I think I've demonstrated already that all three of those elements I try to include when I pitch the story. So what are we often getting instead? Oftentimes when we open a pitch for the first time, there's a lot of writing in there, right? And it would contain paragraphs like this. And I'll just read it quickly. And this is incidentally not from a pitch. This is just a type of thing. I copied and pasted this from an academic article, but it would follow a very similar format. And this is what I call burying the lead or missing the point of the lead altogether, right? The issues of climate change and its impact on food security are increasingly recognized in different parts of the world, including Africa. Africa is epitomized as very vulnerable. Other studies project that Africa is highly vulnerable. Studies mainly found that climate change has severe impact on agricultural land. There's something about food security. We've got some statistics in here now. South Africa is not immune to these impacts. It's worth noting that the global population continues to rise, blah, etc., right? So what we have oftentimes, we do not want to see that. What we have oftentimes is these kind of long-winded descriptions of topics and problems in the world, right? They almost read like topic summaries, but there's no real sense of the journalism that is being proposed about it. What we do as an editor then is we screen this and we try and identify, is this journalist proposing a specific angle, right, on how some wrongdoing by somebody is contributing to food insecurity that is being aggravated by climate change? And do they have some evidence to back it up? But more often than not, we have to screen and read through these long descriptions and then go and do the work for the journalist to isolate those little tidbits. Sometimes we find them and we feel like, okay, the lead has been buried, but they have got some interesting insight or access to source material, some angle that's specific that they want to pursue. They just haven't pitched it very well. But you're running a risk there because you're asking the editor who is looking at 70 pitches over the week to do your work for you in terms of elevating that lead, your best access, your best framing, your best kind of specific angle that you're going to be reporting. And, I can say from experience, after a while, the diligence with which I screen pitches for those things starts falling away if we're presented with these long-winded descriptions. So how do we avoid this? I'm sorry, I wanted these bullet points to come up one at a time, but let's just look at them one at a time. The first, how do we avoid burying the lead? Well, the first piece of advice is before you even start writing, I would say that take this format and have it really clear in your mind before you start writing the pitch. This is the wrongdoing by whatever entity or agency or person. This is how it's contributing to some harm in the world. And this is the evidence that I have in hand to back up that kind of claim, that hypothesis. And make sure that you're really clear in your understanding that this is what you want us to understand about your pitch before you start writing it. So then you know, most of what you're going to write will expound or support or expand on these three things, especially the wrongdoing and the evidence. I might add the harm, you know, you don't have to convince us that female genital mutilation is bad, or that climate change is going to lead to food insecurity, or that drug trafficking across the border is wrong and causing harm in the country. Like those are, I mean, that's a given. Speak to us about the wrongdoing, the specific angle of something that contributes to that harm and what evidence you have it, and then sell that evidence. So moving on to that point, elevate and brag about your best source material. You saw in the pitch about the police brutality, I was like, I have this access to the source material. This is really exclusive. This is never seen before. Use those kind of words that sells why what you have access to and the angle that you have is really original. Why is it significant, amazing, original? And related to that, of course, is avoid long-winded summaries of topics and problems. But there's a caveat here. Of course, there are certain key facts, events, context that can lend urgency to your angle. So if South Africa's children are falling way behind in literacy reading outcomes, and you've got a story about how the government has failed in a very specific way to support reading outcomes, put that point in. This is a specifically urgent problem in the context that I'm reporting on it. But don't go and copy and paste or summarize long kind of academic descriptions of that issue. Just use the best and the most incisive facts to back up the urgency of your angle. So be selective. So this is the format that we're returning to. Wrongdoing contributes to harm, and it's backed up by some evidence that I have. My question then is, if we follow this format, are we automatically going to write a winning pitch? And the answer, of course, unfortunately, is no, because burying the lead doesn't follow this format, right? But what I'm saying, unfortunately, is even if you do follow this format, there are mistakes that you can make that will kill the story, even if the format is followed perfectly. So unfortunately not. Purely following this format is not going to win you support for your pitch. I am going to show an example of this. But first, we're going to just look at how it does follow that format. Okay, so I talked about literacy. Literacy rates across Southern Africa lag behind the rest of the developing world. There we go. There's a problem. Okay, the kids are lagging behind here, right? So now we know why we're looking at this issue. The target of this investigation, incidentally, this is adapted from a pitch that we received. It wasn't about literacy, but it follows a similar format. The target of this investigation will be governments in Southern Africa and how their education policies are not adequately supporting literacy outcomes of primary school learners, leading to kids falling behind the rest of the world in reading ability and hurting their future prospects. Okay, like, yeah, sure, we can believe that there's a policy kind of shortfall there or an implementation shortfall. That is believable. The wrongdoing I will seek to prove is maladministration policy geared at literacy. Okay, it just says the same thing. I will also expose other factors that contribute to poor literacy outcomes, which include lack of parental support, books and learning materials not arriving in schools, school infrastructure not being properly maintained. I will interview government officials, teachers, NGOs working in the field. I also have access to a recent report from the UNHCR, which highlights the key facts regarding the reading crisis in South Africa. So here we have, this is the wrongdoing they're alleging. And this is what they're saying about their source material on which they will premise or try and prove this. So Okay, I was going to pause for reflection, but I'm just going to move on because I think we can kind of see where we're going with this. This pitch follows the format that we suggested it should follow, but this summary, and this might be the summary that we pull out of a very convoluted and long-winded pitch, trying to highlight the essentials. What is the problem? What is the contribution by a powerful person or entity? And what source material is that kind of assertion premised on? So what I want to say about this is, I mean, pitfall 2, I just want to put that up. Vague, sweeping generalizations when your editor is looking for specifics. So let's quickly return to this. We are talking about governments in Southern Africa. I mean, that is just like which governments where education policies are not being adequately supporting literacy outcomes. What education policies in which governments where? Like we can believe that that's the case, but it is so vague. It is so sweeping. And even though there might be something to it, there's nothing in this pitch that demonstrates that this journalist has got any specific insight that gives us confidence that they have a unique ability to report this pitch. Not only that, they don't have that, but they're already saying that they want to look at 4 or 5 other angles. Lack of parental support, books and learning materials not arriving at school, and school infrastructure not being properly maintained. So they want to not focus, but they want to they don't want to focus on the thing that they pitched originally, but they want to expand already the investigation to include a whole range of other issues. And unfortunately, they're not demonstrating that they have access to any unique kind of source material that will show them that will support any one of those things. Often journalists say, I have access to government officials and whistleblowers. But I mean, that is really hard to trust when you just say it like that. If you say to me, I have access to a teacher with whom I have developed a relationship in the rural provinces of the Eastern Cape, and she can give us insight on this specific challenge, just that one source that you can consolidate and sell is going to be so much better, right, than all of the descriptive and platitudes that we often see in pitches. So yeah, I guess that is that the vagueness and the sweepingness can often extend to journalists' attempts at foregrounding the sources that they will draw on. So vague, sweeping generalizations. So let's just quickly look at another example of this kind of format. The use of crystal meth has skyrocketed in township communities in South Africa. Instead of curbing the problem, corruption in the police service is enabling the drug trade. Key police officers in the countries are on the payroll of some of the country's biggest drug trafficking syndicates. In return for bribes, they supply these syndicates with seized street drugs from police stores and allow the operations to continue unimpeded in gang territories. My investigation will seek to expose this corruption in its many forms. I will prove this through interviews with police officers, NGOs, and township communities working on drug use prevention. I'm being a little bit hyperbolic here. Like I'm overemphasizing the point. You know, oftentimes there are silver linings in these types of pitches, but this is the type of pitfall that people fall into. If you see a sweeping generalization, if you reread your pitch and you see a sweeping generalization, trust me, like we are going to pick it up as well, and it's going to raise a big question mark. So again, here there's an issue, there's a problem. There's all sorts of allegations of, you know, cops are being paid off by drug syndicates. Okay, this is an issue as old as time. Cops have always been on the payrolls of organized crime. There is an attempt at saying like they seize the drugs. Okay, that's interesting to me. What are they doing specifically? They're taking drugs from the storerooms and they're giving it to the things. But again, like this journalist is saying and the shame often is that journalists often do have access to police officers. They're just not selling it. That's another form of burying the lead, because sometimes you go and speak to a journalist that submitted this pitch and she says, no, of course, I've got 4 or 5 police officers that have already told me this. Why else would I have said that I can write the story? There's no way for an editor to distinguish whether you have the access that you're purporting or whether it's just kind of a perspective, maybe I can do this kind of thing. And if you have the access and source material to back up your assertions, you really need to elevate and foreground that. So the main problem, and this deals with access and sourcing, the main problem with these sweeping generalizations is that you don't actually have the access, or you putting a big question mark in your editor's mind as to whether you have any source material, people, locations, evidence, data, documents to back up your sweeping assertions. Let's look at, okay, so we've covered that police corruption kind of angle. Okay, yeah, just give me a moment. So we've covered the challenges with these vague and sweeping generalizations and the types of pitches that we're having to process as editors on the regular, and look out for the 1 or 2 pieces of very specific details. And my advice to any pitching journalist would be specific in everything that you write. Don't write in generalizations. What, where, this is where the what, where, when, who, why, and how, I've put there, how do you know, of stock standard journalism reporting can stand you in really, really good stead. Be specific, even avoid the grandiose generalizations, even if you only have something specific, like one conversation with one police officer that has pointed you in this direction. Elevate that specific thing. Do not elevate the generalizations and the vague assertions that everybody kind of knows. Everyone knows that police officers take bribes from drug dealers sometimes. Differentiate between the general topic and the problem that your investigation is operating, that you're working on within, because it's convoluted, it's expansive, it has many, many aspects to it. And focus on the investigative angle of wrongdoing that contributes to that expansive problem in some sort of small way or big way, but in very, very specific and focused way. So how do you focus it? Well, I would say be led by your sources and not the other way around. So if you have access, using this example of the police and the drugs, if you have access to 2 police officers in one community, foreground that and then put the general issue as like, this is illustrative of a broader problem, but this is what the story is about. This is the access, this is the story, and we can tell a broader story, but we are putting a lens on something specific. We can project it or expand it to something more systemic, but the story really is going to be focused on the best access that I have currently and that I will pursue over the course of my reporting. So just, in your pitch, project the importance of your access, your source material, and the plans that you have for reporting further if given the opportunity. So this is that pitch example. I just wanted to put a kind of an example of how a pitch that's similar to this might catch our eye more specifically. So we all know that drugs is a methamphetamine in South Africa, big problem. Police corruption, big problem. The relationship between drug dealers and police, obvious, big problem, right? What are you going to contribute to those things that we all kind of know intuitively? Well, this is a completely fabricated pitch, but it's the kind of thing that might catch an editor's eye because of its specificity and because of its elevation of some source material. Let's say this journalist is from the township of Eldorado Park, south of Johannesburg. Like many townships, communities, Eldorado Park, south of Johannesburg, has seen an influx of methamphetamine in recent years. Okay, it's a broader problem, but it concentrates in this microcosm where we are looking right now. Drug dealers in the community are able to continue their trade, their operations, because they have key police officers at the local station on their payrolls. One of the main services that these officers provide is tip-offs about impending drug raids, and they steal drugs from supply stores to give to the dealers. Again, this is complete fabrication, but it's the kind of pitch that would certainly pique our interest much more. I know this because I have access to one police officer who is willing to be interviewed anonymously, and he has witnessed how the operation works firsthand. I will also interview the mother, Mrs. Julie's. I just put that in, so like this is a specific person that they're talking about. It's not just maybe I'm going to go find a mother. It's like I've already spoken to somebody who has lost 2 of her sons due to drug addiction, to show the impact, the harm that methamphetamine, the human cost that methamphetamine trade is contributing to in this area, to families in this area. Might I just check, is everybody still good? Ndapo Shali, this presentation was scheduled to continue half an hour. Should I speed it up, or can I, for a training session, I'm sure if the Zoom call stays on, we can continue a little bit beyond the hour, but is that okay, or should I wrap up? I don't want to.
We can
Yeah.
proceed. We do have some interactions in the chat, but we can do that once you're done with your presentation. And then we
I'm
also,
going to, yeah, thanks.
yeah.
I'm going to assume that everybody that signed up here is able to go over an hour a little bit. If you're very pressed, there will be a recording of this and of this presentation. And if you want to engage me, if anything that stimulated you and you want to email me, I'm happy to speak about this stuff because I love this stuff. So you are welcome to email me. There's going to be a tip sheet that I'm going to produce, and the recording will be available so you can catch up if you need to leave at the end of an hour. Okay, so I've got access to this police officer. He's been chatting to me, right? And I'm also going to speak to this mother to show, like, the story's going to have another layer to show the human cost. Okay, that's only 2 sources, guys. But already I'm convinced, like, cool, do the story. Like, but do you see what I mean? It doesn't have to be like you took months to get records through public records requests and stuff. These are 2 compelling story elements and sources that this person has pitched, and they have pitched a clear angle of wrongdoing, contribution to harm. Yeah. Given the opportunity to report the story, I believe that I can also interview retired drug dealers in my community whom I have identified. I know who I'm going to speak to, and they can speak about their former relationships with police officers at Eldorado Park Police Station. Again, sorry, I used a very specific police station here. I'm not saying there's any corruption at Eldorado Park Police Station. Just for the record, this is a complete fabrication, right? It was for the pure sake of specificity. So that caveat just added. This is not an isolated case study. What is happening at Eldorado Park Police Station and community is illustrative of a broader pattern of police corruption that enables drug dealing in townships in South Africa. I kind of trailed off there, but I will contextualize this case study within this broader malaise to kind of show that this spotlight here is giving us an insight into something more systemic for the first time. This is the kind of pitch that will immediately at least lead to a callback and an engagement for further. But there's some questions that arise from this, obviously, but it certainly piques the interest much more from an investigative standpoint. And do you see also, incidentally, how there isn't a long topic description of methamphetamine in South Africa? We don't need to know that meth is bad. You don't need to tell us that. Like, people know that. You don't need to tell us that poaching of rhinos is bad. We know that. What we're interested in is the specific angle, the specific wrongdoing and the contribution by the specific entity, person, not vague. Don't speak about organization, like shadowy organized crime organizations. Speak about specifics. And what evidence you have to back that up. Here I've given an example where it doesn't have to be complicated. One police officer, one case study, and an allegation which seems to be convincing in a specific community that is illustrative of a broader problem or harm in society is really enough to get. And I must say the 2 pitches that we have already contracted in the last week followed a very similar format to this. They looked at something specific and they said, we've got access to some people related to this case study, and what this case study is illustrative of is a broader malaise in our society, and there are these other angles that I might pursue, but I can at least deliver this minimum story. So this is related, but pitfall 3, and I don't have a lot of examples and notes, you might be relieved under this slide just now, but seemingly grand and strong angles fall because they are not backed up by source material. You can speak at length, you can even speak in specifics, but if you cannot, like you can say in this community, at this border point, at this, in this national park, poachers are killing people. You can be extremely specific, but if you cannot demonstrate that you have any access, our first reversion is to think, okay, you've read this online. I'm being a bit facetious, right? But there's nothing to distinguish that kind of pitch from somebody who just read something online and is sitting in a basement 2,000 miles away from where they are purporting to locate this investigation. You have to show that you have done some original groundwork and reporting and access source material to premise your angle on. So how to pitch on the basis of your access to source material, secured and planned. So some source material, you want to say, I've got this. This is the minimum story. I've got this secured. You also want to say, this warrants further work, and this is what I plan to do. So be specific about the progress you've made, the source material that you have access to in hand, and the valuable contribution each will make, right? Again, it can just be one document, one database. Obviously, it's better if it's 2 or 3, or a document and a database and a whistleblower and a victim. The more you put, the better, but at least rank them and elevate them so that we can see what source material, evidence you are going to, that you can already deploy, and what will you be pursuing. And then work backwards from that to formulate your angle of wrongdoing, contributing to a problem and harm in society. So don't try and fit what source material you want to pursue to some angle that you've come up with. Fit your angle and base it on the source material that you already have and the source material that you believe that you can reasonably access through the course of a couple of weeks of reporting. Okay, that was a lot, guys. I hope you're with me, but I am very happy to share the tip sheet, as I said, and to engage on this stuff if I move too fast on anything. Part of my conception of the Southern Africa Accountability Journalism Project is to help journalists upskill themselves to be better investigative minds and journalists, not just for contributing to this project, but to contributing to all aspects of their work and the accountability potential of their work. And so I really would value if any of you wanted to engage me, to have a conversation, to raise anything that didn't make sense, or that you had challenge with following, so that that conversation can continue. And before a forum is set up, we can just do that on email. Very briefly,
Yeah.
Anton, should we wrap up?
Yes, please.
Okay. This is the last slide, Anton, and then we can wrap up, okay?
Thank you.
So how do we apply this to the pitching questionnaire? The first question you're going to be asked is, what is your hypothesis? And this is basically, you just need to state who is doing what wrong, what problem is it aggravating or harm does it contribute to in the world? The second thing you're going to be asked is, what source material do you have access to right now, and how does this contribute and show this? And what minimum story will you be able to tell? What will that story look like on the basis of that source material? And finally, what source material and progress would you like to make, given the opportunity to report further over 6 to 8 weeks, say? What is the strongest possible story that you think that you will be able to produce on the basis of that reporting and source material? And why should we support that work? And if you can succeed in taking some of the pointers and avoiding some of the pitfalls that we've identified and just adapting it to this format, there's absolutely no reason why your pitch shouldn't be successful in this context or in any context that you pitch investigative journalism. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Daneel. Thank you. Let me ask, thank you very much. I hope what has been brought home strongly is that, we're getting a lot of pitches. So if you want to get noticed, you really will strengthen it enormously and raise your chances enormously if you follow these guidelines. You have to get our attention, and the way to do it is make it concise, hard-hitting, and meet the criteria very clearly. So thank you for that. I'm going to ask my other colleagues if they want to add anything to be said, and then we're going to deal with one or two questions that have been raised in the chat. Please, if you have any questions about the project at all, put them in the chat, and we will respond to them now. Joel, do you want to add anything?
Quickly, just to reiterate and emphasize what Daneel said, and he really put it across really in a very impressive and concise way. What, like we said previously, what we noticed, and we just try to discourage colleagues, is to think that a long feature writing idea is a pitch for an investigative story. So Daneel said it nicely that we should develop an investigative journalist mindset, which really helps to think about issues around harm, around more deep around the evidence. And because most of the pitches we've seen sort of fishing, there's very little effort where the evidence is and where the wrongdoing is. So I think my colleagues, especially from Botswana, but all colleagues really should pay more attention to showing and demonstrating the way Daneel did, where the evidence is and how to reach out to it. Thank you. And then quickly to a freelance reporter, Kesero, and anyone else who might have specific requests. If you are a freelancer and you need help, I am here to help. I've provided my email address. I'll be happy to assist you, talk to sources if we reach that stage. Yeah. Thank you, Anton.
Thank you very much. Fiona, do you want to add anything?
Hi, yes, just a very quick point. And again, I think that Daneel's done a very good job of summarizing what we're looking for. But one of the things I'd like to advise journalists is to, before you pitch your story, is to think of a headline that you would put on the story, and then also perhaps the lead or blurb or intro. So if in your own mind you can envisage what this investigation is going to lead to at the end of the day, if you understand what I mean, you need to see the end product in order to give input at the beginning of the process. I think that that's quite a useful, that's a useful little exercise that you should practice before you submit any pitch or before you start writing any pitch. That's all I'm going to add now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Those are helpful. Ndapa Washali, do you want to add anything?
Yes, so there was a question about those who had some more administrative thing about those who have already submitted, if they can um, now that they've attended today, if they can refine their pitches and then resubmit them. And then just on a more operational issue, there is a poll running, and we'd be really grateful if you could please just respond to the poll. We just want to know where you're from. You can also scan the QR code in the chat. And then there'll be a second poll in which we will just ask you how you felt about today and if you'd like us to have another one of these. So please just respond to those, and that's it from me.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me add to what has been said. If you have put in a pitch that you think you can improve, please send us a note to say, hold with my pitch, I'm going to resubmit, and I'll do so within 24 or 48 or 72 hours. Just notify us so we don't waste our time on your current pitch. But we'll happily take another version if it's improved and stronger. We have a question from somebody from Zimbabwe who says, what if I have an interesting topic, but I work for a government paper which would not dare to publish the story because of political interests? Can I pitch for another media which will put a pseudo name for my story? The short answer is, if your story is good and meets the criteria, we will help you get it published. It's best if we start with a local Zimbabwean publication that will publish it, perhaps under a pseudonym or another identity. We will also look for other publishing opportunities. So we will help you get the story out if it's a strong story that needs to be out. There will be practical issues one has to deal with. Can you do the story if you're working full-time for a government paper? How are you going to do it? Or do you have it already? How are you going to give it the time? But those are practical issues that we would gladly discuss with you in some detail, because if there's a good story, we want to help you get it done and get it out. There was another question about somebody who says, I'm not currently practicing, but have worked prior as a journalist, and I have no formal media ID card, which may be needed, obviously, for interviews, etc. Now, some places it's very hard without an ID card, a formal card. In other places, it's less necessary. So it really depends where you're working from. You know, if you're working with us and you're contracted to us, we can give you a card or a letter that says you're working with us, if that's of any help. But I don't think that's an official one. It may not be any help in a place which demands an official card. So really, we need you to tell us how we could help you get what you need in order to be able to do the story. If you have any ideas, we're open to hear them. If any of my colleagues want to add to those responses, I welcome them to just signal and come in.
And there is a
Yeah.
there is a question about the cross-border element. Maybe we can address that.
Okay. How does the cross-border element work? Well, let me put it this way. Sometimes we get pitches from different countries on the same kind of topic, and they clearly overlap, but they're in two different countries. For example, a story about migrancy, and it involves more than one country, or a story about human traffic, or a story about drug trafficking, which spreads across borders. There's a number of ways in which it could work. We could put journalists together to collaborate. We understand the importance of collaboration on many of these stories. We encourage collaboration. So we can put journalists together to collaborate from different countries If one journalist needs help from another in another country, we can help facilitate that. Or if two journalists are working on similar areas, we will help put them together so that they can share notes, assist each other, share ideas, and collaborate in whatever way suits them both. If you come along with a collaborative story saying, I'm teaming up with the journalist in another country because we want to tackle this cross-border story, that's excellent. We would be really keen and interested in a story like that. So I hope that answers your question. Does this apply to print media only?
Sorry, Anton, may I jump in on the cross-border issue?
Please do.
There might be a little bit of confusion in that the pilot project we ran 6 months, over the last 6 months, required that journalists demonstrate some sort of cross-border element in the story that they were pitching. That was a requirement of the pilot project. The reason we did that is because we saw this as a truly regional kind of outlook, editorially and collaboratively. And we were looking for stories that weren't hyper-local to the context of the community or even the country that journalists were pitching from, but that had some sort of regional cross-border ramification. We still think that those are really, really important stories, and we would look very favorably on pitches that contain elements like that. Apart from Anton's point of saying we'll try and match and support collaborations between journalists, but it is not a strict prescriptive requirement at the moment, because we wanted to cast the net as wide in this first kind of phase of the project proper to incorporate and bring in as many quality investigative pitches, but also keep in mind that pitches that are hyper-local might not appeal to the kind of regional audience outlook, editorial outlook that we have taken as part of this project. So your chances might be bigger if they are cross-border, first of all, but also if they're looking at bigger issues within your country and society than just something that's very hyper-local.
Thank you, Daneel. That's important. It's not a requirement, but it's nice when it is an element, and it's important to emphasize that. Does this apply to print media only? Let me put it this way. We will support a project that is, we would like multimedia output as best we can. But obviously we're working with limited budgets, and major long video documentaries are probably outside of our budget, unless you've got some funds from elsewhere as well. But it's not strictly limited to print. We would very much like, if it is for print, for it to have graphic and audio visual and other elements as well. But I think the nature of the budgets we're talking about is that it will be primarily print, but not exclusively so. Daneel, would you like to add to that?
Print or online writing, not necessarily physical printed newspaper.
Quite right. By print, I mean I include online. I mean words and graphics and pictures rather than video and other forms. Thank you. Any further questions?
Anton, we have some more questions. Maybe one, since we have an ongoing, there is no deadline for the entirety of the project except for the first one. There is a question that asks that if their pitch is successful, can they then continue to pitch for another story while already working on one story, or will they have to wait to finish their story first?
Look, I would think we want to finish one story before we tackle, and we want to finish one story and make sure we've got the maximum out of that story, the maximum story, before we tackle something entirely different. So it would be a very unusual circumstance for us to be working on two very different things at one time. I guess there can be an exception, but in general, we would say, if you want to put in two pitches, we will start by choosing the best one, the most appropriate one, and run with that, because we really want to focus on getting that story right quickly. And I don't think it's going to work if you're working on two major stories side by side. That would be my view. Daneel, would you like to add anything?
Quite right. I mean, I think journalists should focus on getting a successful pitch in first, because that would be a big coup for anyone pitching, I think. But again, freelance journalists are working on often a number of topics, or your angles might be arising from all sorts of work that you've done historically that might apply to the kind of format that we're looking for. And there's nothing stopping you from elevating 2 or 3 of your best angles as pitches. We will look at each one on its own merits. And if all 3 of them warrant it, we will work out a way with you to do that over a period of time that ensures that you can give your all to the ones that are priorities, but that backloads the other ones for future collaboration. But the scenario, quite rightly, of you working full-time or even semi-full-time, part-time on 2 in-depth attempts at delivering an investigative story over 6 weeks, that's probably unlikely, I'd say, from experience and from just editorial kind of point of view.
Okay, we're going to move towards wrapping up. So let me deal quickly with 1 or 2 of the outstanding questions. One person asked if they can get the list of participants, contact details from this. Unfortunately, we haven't asked people if we can share their details, so it would not be ethical or proper for us to share them. But we are going to be working at building up a network of people who participate in our project and these events, and are building our mailing list. If you are looking for something in particular, or you want to send a message out, you can send it to us and ask us if we are able to distribute it. But clearly we need to be careful about how we do it, and we can't give away people's details. Certainly not. Somebody asked, I think we've answered this question about whether you can pitch more than 2 story ideas. We've said, let's get 1 going. It would only be in exceptional circumstances that somebody's got 2 great stories that can go simultaneously. And then, based on the budget, would you increase it if the reporting is far from a reporter's location? The short answer is yes. We do have yes, that if the story merits it and involves travel, we will cover reasonable travel expenses. So you need to give us an idea of exactly what it will cost, and we can look at it. And of course, it depends on whether the story merits the expense. There was one more, I think.
There
I can read it.
was a question about whether or not somebody's story can be outside of SADC, but I think those are all in our, maybe if I can just encourage people to look at our frequently asked questions. I've sent a link in the chat as well. And then there was, I think Daneel had already said that he would share the presentation via email, so we will send that later, as well as a tip sheet.
Yeah, what I think we should do is put it up on our website where people can download it, I would suggest. But either way, we'll make it available. At this stage, we do not have budget for doing work outside of SADC. So we won't be looking at pictures, but perhaps in the future we will. But at this stage, we do not have funding to do stories outside of SADC. Please look at our website, get all the details there. I see there's a couple of people who've indicated they're still not sure how to pitch. Please take a close look at what we've said on the website. Look at the presentation that you'll see from Daneel. We will also post the recording of this session, so you can watch it again if you want to. And then if you have specific questions, please email those to us at the Henry Nxumalo Foundation, or to any of us individually, and we'll do our best to answer that. I think that draws things to an end, unless any of my colleagues want to add anything. Thank you very much, Daneel, for your presentation. and to all my colleagues for making this happen. And thank you all for your time. We look forward to the possibility of working with you, and I hope you are as excited as I am, and we are, about the possibility of producing some really interesting, powerful, impactful journalism. Thank you very much, and let's stay in touch.
Thank you. Bye.